built to run and run and run. Pinto, a little better idea at your Ford.
Everyone loves a classic Ford until it breaks down. They look cool and bring back memories, but some of these old Fords are hiding expensive problems under the hood. From hard-to-find parts to repairs that cost more than the car itself, they can be a real headache. And if you think Ford stopped making money pits after the 70s, think again. A few newer models that prove some mistakes just keep happening are included in this video. Stay tuned as we unpack 13 Fords that should be avoided like a plague. Number 13, Ford Pinto. At first glance, the Ford Pinto looked like a smart move. Small, cheap, and efficient, it was Ford's answer to the rising demand for compact cars in the 70s. With gas prices rising and imports from Japan flooding the market, Ford rushed to compete. But behind that low sticker price was a design flaw so serious, it turned the Pinto into a national scandal. The danger lay in its fuel tank design. Engineers placed the tank between the rear axle and the bumper with very little reinforcement. In low-speed rear-end collisions, the tank could puncture or rupture, leaking fuel and sparking devastating fires. Victims were trapped in flames, and Pinto earned a horrifying nickname, the barbecue that seats four. Worse still, internal Ford documents revealed the company knew about the flaw and decided not to fix it. Their cold calculation? It would cost more to recall the cars than to pay out legal claims. That infamous decision made Pinto not just dangerous, but a symbol of corporate greed and negligence. Even setting the fire risk aside, the Pinto was never a good car. It was cheaply built with thin metal, underpowered engines, and a stripped-down interior. Rust was common, the ride was noisy, and the build quality was hit or miss depending on the plant it came from. Driving one today feels less like a classic experience and more like a punishment. And while some buyers might be tempted by the car's notoriety, the Pinto isn't collectible in the way Mustangs or Thunderbirds are. Its ugly legacy has tanked resale value, and parts aren't as common as you'd expect from a car that sold in the millions. The Ford Pinto isn't just unreliable, it's historically dangerous. It represents everything that can go wrong when cutting costs matters more than protecting lives. If there's one Ford you should never bring home, it's this one. Number 12, Ford Econoline pickup. To a casual eye, the Ford Econoline pickup is a quirky piece of automotive history. Its flat front design, compact size, and no-nonsense layout made it stand out in the early 1960s. For collectors, it might even seem charming, like something you'd see at a retro car show or in a vintage surf movie. However, one should not be deceived by nostalgia. This truck is a handling disaster, a maintenance nightmare, and a money pit in disguise. The Econoline pickup borrowed its layout from Ford's first-generation Econoline van. That means the driver sits practically over the front wheels, with the engine wedged between the seats. There's no front crumple zone, and in a crash, you become the crumple zone. Safety wasn't exactly the top priority here, but the real trouble starts when you try to drive it. The pickup is front-heavy, extremely so. About 60% of its weight is over the front axle. That imbalance makes it feel like it wants to nosedive around every corner. Combine that with small drum brakes, vague steering, and a high center of gravity, and you get a truck that's unstable, especially when unloaded. Even though Ford knew it was sketchy, they eventually added ballast in the back just to improve balance. Then there's the maintenance. Parts for the Econoline pickup aren't as easy to find as you might think. Many components are unique to this model and its van sibling, and that means higher prices and longer searches. Plus, getting to the engine, which lives under a small doghouse between the seats, is awkward and limits what you can do without a full teardown. Sure, it looks cool in Instagram posts or parked at car meets, but actually owning and driving one is a different story. One would find themselves spending more time beneath the truck than in the driver's seat, chasing down hard-to-find bushings, brake parts, and steering components. The Econoline pickup is one of those classics that's better left admired from a distance. It's not reliable, not safe, and not worth the price unless you're a die-hard fan with deep pockets and plenty of patience. It might be rare, but there's a reason for that. Number 11, Ford Mustang. The Ford Mustang Grande looks like a luxurious version of the iconic pony car. It came with vinyl roofs, extra soundproofing, wood grain trim, and a softer ride feature that screamed classy. But dig a little deeper, and the Grande reveals itself as one of the most disappointing and least loved Mustangs ever made, a bloated, underpowered shell of its former self. The Grande was introduced during a strange time in Mustang history. As insurance rates for muscle cars soared and government regulations tightened, Ford shifted its focus. Instead of raw power, they aimed for comfort and style. The result was a bigger, heavier Mustang built more for cruising than performance. The problem is, it didn't cruise particularly well, and it sure didn't perform. By 1971, the Mustang had grown significantly in size and weight compared to its 1960s predecessors. The Grande, weighed down with extra sound-deadening material, plush seats, and body enhancements, tipped the scales even further. Paired with weak base engines like the 250 cubic inch inline-six or a low-output 302 V8, the Grande had all the style of a muscle car, but none of the muscle. Even upgraded V8 options were dulled by emissions restrictions and detuned performance. Driving it was uninspiring. It wallowed in corners, felt sluggish off the line, and lacked the tight handling that made early Mustangs so beloved. And while it looked upscale from a distance, much of the interior luxury was just plastic dressed up as wood. Mechanically, it wasn't particularly reliable either, especially once emission systems began to complicate underhood access and repairs. Worse, the Grande hasn't aged gracefully in the collector world. While classic Mustangs typically hold their value or appreciate, the Grande is one of the few variants that consistently underperforms at auction. Parts are somewhat available, but because the model's not widely sought after, demand is low and so is aftermarket support. The Mustang Grande promised class and comfort, but delivered disappointment. It's heavy, slow, and lacks the soul of a true Mustang. If you're chasing Mustang nostalgia, you'd be better off with a 65 Fastback or a Mach 1 because the Grande is all sizzle and no steak. The Ford Torino Elite, or simply the Ford Elite, tried to cash in on America's love for personal luxury coupes in the mid-70s. Number 10 Ford Torino Elite. It borrowed heavy styling cues from the much pricier Thunderbird and Lincoln Mark IV, but under all the vinyl roofs and opera windows was a gas-guzzling Torino with zero performance edge and a repair bill that could send you running. Introduced in 1974 as a new top-of-the-line trim in the Torino lineup, the Elite was designed to compete with cars like the Chevrolet Monte Carlo and Chrysler Cordoba. It featured a massive body, padded vinyl top, hidden headlamps, plush interior appointments, and enough chrome to blind you in direct sunlight. It screamed luxury, but all on the cheap. Here's the catch. The Elite was heavy, nearly 4,500 pounds depending on trim, and it handled like it. Steering was vague, cornering was sluggish, and the suspension was tuned for comfort at the cost of control. You didn't drive an Elite so much as you floated in one slowly. And if you hit the brakes too hard, don't expect a modern response. Stopping this beast took effort, time, and prayer. Under the hood, most Elites came with the 351 or 400 cubic inch V8s, big numbers on paper, but in the early emissions-regulated era, horsepower was modest. These engines were thirsty, averaging around 10 to 12 mpg at best. Combine that with rising gas prices in the mid-70s, and you've got a car that punished your wallet at every pump, and it gets worse. While some parts were shared with other Torino models, the Elite had plenty of trim-specific components. Replacing body panels, chrome pieces, or interior trim can be a scavenger hunt, and restoration often costs more than the car's actual resale value. Today, the Elite doesn't command much love in the collector world. It's too new to be a true classic and too old and inefficient for modern roads. Even die-hard Ford fans tend to skip this one. The Mercury Marauder X00 sounds like it should be a hidden gem. A luxury muscle car with a big V8, sleek fastback styling, and serious presence. But while it looks aggressive and sounds powerful on paper, owning one today is more of a financial sinkhole than a thrilling investment. Number 9. Mercury Marauder X100. Let's start with what it was supposed to be. The X100 was Mercury's attempt to blend muscle car performance with upscale luxury. It came standard with a 429 cubic inch V8, producing up to 360 horsepower. That's a lot of engine and a lot of promise. But here's the reality. This car weighed over 4,300 pounds. That horsepower had to work overtime just to get the car moving. It felt powerful in a straight line, but agility was non-existent. Attempt to turn swiftly in one of these, and one might insist that the car is in disagreement with you. The ride was soft, the suspension was floaty, and the steering was disconnected. In short, it was more of a couch on wheels than a muscle car. Yes, it could do a smoky burnout, but don't expect any sharp handling or responsive driving. Then there's the issue of parts and restoration. The Marauder X00 wasn't produced in large numbers, and many of its trim pieces, including that sweeping fastback roofline and hidden headlight setup, are unique. That means when something breaks, which something will, one will likely be scouring junkyards or paying top dollar for hard-to-find replacements. And don't even think about fuel economy. With a massive engine and a body built like a battleship, the X100 guzzled gas, even by 1970s standards. Owners today report single-digit miles per gallon in real-world driving. Combine that with sluggish handling, high upkeep costs, and low collector demand, and you're looking at a car that offers all the expense of a classic with none of the glory. Number 8, Ford Thunderbird. In the early 80s, the Ford Thunderbird made a bold comeback. After years of growing bulkier and more bloated, the '83 Thunderbird arrived with sleek, aerodynamic lines that looked nothing like its brick-shaped predecessors. It was one of Ford's first production cars shaped in a wind tunnel, and people took notice. The design even won awards. But beneath that futuristic skin was a heap of compromises, outdated technology, and electrical headaches that have made this T-Bird one of the most frustrating classic Fords to own today. While the styling screamed modern luxury coupe, the base engine was a weak 3.8 LV6 that struggled to move the car's 3,400 pounds. Even the optional V8 was detuned and underwhelming. A turbocharged 2.3 L inline-4 was available on the Turbo Coupe, but early turbo tech was finicky and prone to failure, and the engine bay wasn't exactly DIY-friendly. Handling was another issue. Ford tried to blend comfort and performance, but landed somewhere in between. The car didn't corner well, didn't ride especially smoothly, and wore out suspension components fast. It looked fast, but didn't drive like it. Then there's the real money pit problem: electronics. The 1983 to 88 T-Bird was packed with early digital gauges, touch controls, power accessories, and electronic climate systems. In the 80s, that felt high-tech. Today, it feels like a nightmare. Those components are notorious for failing, and most aren't being reproduced. Tracking down replacement modules, relays, or dash clusters is a scavenger hunt through eBay listings and junkyards. Even something simple like a power seat switch or digital speedometer can set you back hundreds. And despite its initial popularity, this generation Thunderbird doesn't have strong collector value. The Turbo Coupe has a niche following, but the rest of the lineup is mostly forgotten. That means you're investing time and money into a car that few people want and one that's not likely to pay you back. The 80s Thunderbird had style, but not much else. Today, it's a money pit disguised as a classic. Unless you love troubleshooting old electronics and chasing hard-to-find parts, steer clear of this digital disaster. When Ford launched the Maverick in 1970s, it was supposed to be the company's no-fuss answer to the rising wave of small, fuel-efficient imports. It was compact, affordable, and easy to maintain, a car for the everyday American. Number 7, Ford Maverick. On paper, it sounded like a win, but in reality, the Maverick cut so many corners in design, quality, and performance that it ended up being one of Ford's most disposable cars of the decade. Let's start with the build quality, or lack of it. The Maverick was intentionally designed to be cheap. It was assembled using many carryover parts from other Ford vehicles, including suspension components, drivetrain options, and interior fittings. Unfortunately, this created a car that felt cobbled together rather than purpose-built. Doors were thin, interior trim rattled, and rust was a major issue, especially around the rear quarters and rocker panels. Early models came standard with a weak 170 cubic inch straight-six engine, which offered sluggish acceleration and poor passing power. Even when upgraded to the optional 200 or 250 inline sixes or the later 302 V8, the Maverick never felt particularly quick. And unlike the Mustang, which inspired some of its styling, the Maverick never delivered a performance driving experience. Handling was dull and vague, thanks to soft suspension and manual steering. The ride was harsh over bumps, and the cabin offered minimal sound insulation. It may have looked sporty, but it drove more like a stripped-down economy car, which, to be fair, is exactly what it was. Today, restoring a Maverick doesn't make much financial sense. Collector interest is minimal, and resale values remain low. Parts are somewhat available, but the model lacks the fan base or aftermarket support of Mustangs or Falcons. That means you'll likely sink more into repairs and restoration than you'll ever get back. The Ford Maverick was never built to last. It was built to sell fast. It served its purpose as a cheap runabout in the 70s, but time hasn't done it any favors. Unless you're collecting forgotten Ford oddballs, there's little reason to bring a Maverick back to life. Number 6. Ford LTD II. The Ford LTD II was one of those cars that tried to do too much, combining luxury size, family practicality, and performance flair, but ended up doing none of it well. Introduced as a replacement for the Torino, the LTD landed right in the middle of the 1970s gas crisis and quickly became a symbol of everything wrong with American car design in that era: too big, too slow, too thirsty, and too hard to love. Built on the aging Torino platform, the LTD was massive, nearly 18 feet long, and it felt every inch of it. Maneuvering this beast through parking lots or tight turns was an exercise in patience, and while its long hood and formal roofline gave it an upscale look, that was mostly surface level. Inside, it was roomy but filled with the same cheap plastic and dated trim you'd find in any late 70s Ford. Under the hood, it came with a selection of big block engines like the 351, 400, and 460 V8s. But thanks to emissions regulations and to tuning, they produced surprisingly little horsepower. The car had all the weight of a full-size cruiser, but none of the performance you'd expect from such large engines. Fuel economy was abysmal, as low as 9 to 12 mpg, making it one of the least efficient family cars of its time. Mechanically, the LTD wasn't particularly advanced, and reliability was hit or miss. But the real issue today is value. Despite its size and comfort, the LTD never developed a strong enthusiast following. It's overshadowed by the classic LTD Crown Victoria and outclassed by more focused muscle or luxury cars. Parts are available, many are shared with other Ford platforms, but finding LTD-specific trim or body pieces can still be a hassle. And because the LTD was only made for 3 model years, there's very little collector interest. That means you'll be putting money into a car that won't return the investment in attention, performance, or resale. In the early 1980s, Ford decided to jump into the personal coupe game with something smaller and more affordable than the Mustang. The result was the Ford EXP, short for experimental. Number 5. Ford EXP. Based on the front-wheel drive Escort platform, it was meant to blend fuel efficiency with two-seat sportiness. Unfortunately, while it wore the clothes of a sporty car, the EXP was all show and no-go. The EXP shared nearly everything with the Ford Escort, including its engines, suspension, and front-wheel drive layout. That meant it came with a 1.6L inline-4 engine at launch, a tiny power plant that put out a modest 70 horsepower. Even with the EXP's relatively light body, acceleration was embarrassing. 0 to 60 mph took nearly 13 seconds, and passing power was laughable. It looked like a hot hatch, but drove like a tired commuter car. Ford did try to improve things over the years. Later models, like the EXP Turbo and the Escort GT-based variants, offered up to 120 horsepower, which helped performance somewhat. But by that point, the car's reputation was already damaged. People had learned the hard way that the EXP was more economic than exciting. Styling was another mixed bag. The early models had smooth, sloping hoods and bubble-like headlights, which gave the EXP a distinct, almost futuristic look for the early 80s. But as time went on, the design got weirder and boxier, eventually falling into the generic styling trap of the late decade. And inside, it was as basic as the Escort: cheap plastics, thin seats, and minimal features. Today, the EXP holds almost no value. It's rarely seen at classic car shows, and even enthusiasts of obscure Fords tend to pass on it. Replacement parts can be tough to track down, especially for trim and body component, and few restoration shops bother with them. You can still find them for sale, but usually as beat-up, neglected leftovers from an idea that never caught on. The Ford EXP is a perfect example of a car that tried to be everything and ended up as nothing. If you're looking for a cheap classic to restore or drive, there are better options, because this one peaked the moment it left the brochure. Number 4. Ford Fairmont Futura. The Ford Fairmont Futura was meant to bring a little excitement to an otherwise bland compact lineup. With its distinctive B-pillar notchback roofline and semi-fastback styling, it certainly looked different, especially compared to the boxy sedans and wagons it shared a platform with. But once you got behind the wheel, it was clear this car was all about appearance, not performance. And today, it's a forgotten oddball that's more hassle than it's worth. Built on Ford's Fox platform, the same architecture used for the Mustang, Mercury Capri, and even the Lincoln Continental, the Fairmont had decent bones. But Ford didn't really put much heart into the Futura. Most models came with a lazy inline-6 or a 302 V8 that was heavily detuned for emissions. Even with the V8, it felt more like a loafing cruiser than a sporty coupe. Handling was average at best, and ride quality was compromised by the stiff Fox platform combined with soft suspension tuning. Then there's the interior, plain and plasticky, even by late 70s standards. Trim pieces were often flimsy, dashboards cracked easily under sun exposure, and features were minimal. You might get a fake wood panel or vinyl accents, but overall, the Futura didn't deliver anything close to the sporty luxury blend it was marketed as. Maintenance-wise, the Futura is a mixed bag. While mechanical parts like the engine, transmission, brakes are generally easy to source thanks to the Fox platform's widespread use, body parts and interior trim specific to the Futura are another story. That unique roofline? Good luck finding glass, weather stripping, or replacement panels. And because it was never truly popular, aftermarket support is slim to non-existent. Worse, the Futura never gained traction as a collectible. Unlike the Mustang or even the more daring Mercury Capri, the Fairmont Futura has no strong enthusiast following. Values remain low, and very few examples are restored. Most are either rotting in fields or parted out for their Fox body underpinnings. Now we shift gears into the modern era, where Ford's failures didn't just creak or corrode, they stranded families in traffic and turned daily commutes into mechanical roulette. And few models captured that chaos better than the Ford Freestar. Number 3, Ford Freestar, Ford's ill-fated follow-up to the equally troubled Windstar. The Freestar was supposed to compete with Chrysler's minivans and Honda's rock-solid Odyssey. Instead, it delivered engine failures, transmission nightmares, and one of the shortest lifespans in Ford minivan history. On paper, the Freestar looked decent. It offered 3-row seating, a high roofline, dual sliding doors, and a comfortable ride. It had decent crash test scores and a familiar V6 drivetrain. But under that practical shell was a time bomb of mechanical problems, especially for models built in 2004 through 2006. Let's start with the transmission, which became infamous for failing without warning. Thousands of owners reported complete failure at under 80,000 miles, often while driving at highway speeds. The root cause is a weak torque converter shaft that would strip out, rendering the transmission useless. And the worst part was that it had no warning lights, no strange noises, just a sudden loss of power and control, a nightmare for parents hauling kids. The 3.9L and 4.2L V6 engines were also far from bulletproof. They suffered from leaky intake manifolds, ignition coil failures, and poor fuel economy. The 4.2L in particular was known for blowing head gaskets and developing internal coolant leaks, and all of this in a minivan that was already underpowered and sluggish from a stop. The interior quality was no better. Cheap plastics, flimsy trim, and rapidly wearing seats made the Freestar feel old before its time. And while it had modern features for its era, like power sliding doors and a rear DVD player, those gadgets were some of the first things to fail. Many owners joked that it spent more time in the shop than in the driveway. Number 2, Ford Fiesta. Welcome to the modern age of car nightmares where high-tech ambitions met low-budget execution. The 2011 Ford Fiesta was supposed to be a fresh, fun, fuel-efficient subcompact designed for the global market. It looked great, handled sharply, and offered features usually reserved for pricier cars. But beneath that peppy exterior was one of Ford's most damaging blunders of the decade: the power shift transmission. Marketed as a dual-clutch automatic that delivered both fuel efficiency and sporty shifting, the power shift gearbox was supposed to bridge the gap between manuals and automatics. In reality, it became a lawsuit magnet. Owners reported jerky starts, delayed acceleration, shuddering at low speeds, and worst of all, premature transmission failure. It wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. Ford received thousands of complaints, prompting multiple technical service bulletins, software updates, and eventually, class action lawsuits. Some owners had their transmissions replaced multiple times, while others were told it's normal by dealerships. For years, Ford stuck to the story that it was all a misunderstanding until warranty claims and legal pressure forced them to admit there was a real systemic issue. But the problems didn't stop there. The Fiesta's small cabin and tight rear seat made it a tough sell for growing families. Interior materials wore quickly, infotainment systems froze, and road noise was significant, especially at highway speeds. Reliability ratings from Consumer Reports and J.D. Power plummeted, and the resale value followed suit. Even when the transmission was working, the driving experience was a letdown. The car hesitated in traffic, lurched in stop-and-go situations, and gave drivers zero confidence during simple maneuvers like parking or merging. Ironically, the manual transmission versions of the Fiesta were generally reliable, but most buyers got stuck with the automatic and ended up paying for it in frustration, repair bills, or both. Number 1. Ford Escape. The 2013 Ford Escape marked a major redesign for Ford's popular compact SUV with sleek European styling, improved tech, and turbocharged EcoBoost engines meant to balance power with fuel economy. But behind the polished surface was a minefield of mechanical problems that made this Escape anything but safe. Let's start with the engine. The 1.6L EcoBoost, one of the most commonly sold, had a critical design flaw. A faulty coolant system caused the engine to overheat, crack the cylinder head, and leak flammable coolant into hot engine components. It resulted in multiple reported engine fires, several recalls, and panicked owners stranded on the side of the road. Ford issued recall after recall to fix the problem, but even updated models weren't free from risk. The company eventually admitted that the engine could overheat even with normal driving, and if the warning light didn't trigger in time, the damage was already done. And this wasn't an isolated issue, it affected hundreds of thousands of Escapes across North America. The problems didn't end with the fire hazard. The 6-speed automatic transmission was clunky, especially in low-speed situations, and prone to failure before 100,000 miles. Many owners also reported stalling, rough idling, and complete engine shutdowns. And let's not forget the My Ford Touch system, which frequently froze, crashed, or just refused to respond. Despite its modern looks and promising performance numbers, the 2013 Escape quickly became one of the most recalled vehicles in Ford's modern lineup. Between 2012 and 2014, it was hit with dozens of recalls, many related to fire risk, engine cooling, fuel delivery, and brake systems. Today, the 2013 Escape has a poor reliability score, low resale value, and a reputation that still lingers. Even with repairs, owners often report recurring issues, making it one of those cars that seems to punish people for trusting it. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.